We have been exploring a topic this month, something we're all tremendously familiar with, and that is this wonderful thing called the Constancy of Change. I don't know if you've noticed, but things are changing. Always. And it seems as if they're changing faster and faster and faster in my book, but I think that may just be a sign of my age. I do, as I like to say, I do feel more and more like the guy on the lawn saying, "Get off of my lawn." I don't know how that happened. I used to be young and hip and cool, and just not sure what went wrong, what went so very wrong. I noticed that Apple has come out with a new iWatch because apparently you need one of those. And I thought, okay, I'm still trying to figure out the two phones and the iPad. Not like now I got to wear a watch that's going to tell me more things I don't know how to use. But apparently that is a needed thing, and so that's good. Innovation is fabulous. The only thing that I notice is that if we're not careful, that we can be kind of consumed by the world around us. And this ever-evolving and ever-changing thing, and if we're not careful, we can start to believe that that is reality, that what is happening around us is real. And I'm going to suggest to you that the spiritual traditions teach us that what is real is something that is eternal, something that is ineffable, something that is changeless and deathless, as they say in the Eastern tradition. That there is a spiritual reality that is reality and that is forever and ever expressing itself through form. And form changes. Form evolves. Form is always becoming something different. So it's sort of ironic that when life gets uncomfortable for us, we want to go to a form and say, "Please give me my salvation. Please give me my comfort. Please give me my sense of security." Right? And we know that works really well. We know how well that works. So the masters teach us that what we want to do if we're going to find peace in this world is that we find peace within ourselves. As I've been referring to Buddha a lot this month and actually this year, because the whole premise of a path with heart comes from the Buddhist tradition that recognizes that the source of our suffering is in our resistance or our clinging. That is the source of our suffering. It's not the source of our pain. It is the source of our suffering. So I always like that phrase that say, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Right? That we can choose to be in struggle, or we can choose to allow and to let go and to release into the greater something. Easier said than done. I get it. Jesus said to us that we would do well. I like the New International version of this that says, "Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly." Which is to say, we are so often looking at the outer and making our decisions. We look around, we make decisions all the time. We are so bombarded with information. It's a part of our functioning in the world that we have to be able to distinguish between stuff, right? We can't take it all in at once or we just would explode, right? So we are always in this filtering process, but if we're not careful, our filtering moves to a place of bias, and if we're not careful, our bias moves to a place of prejudice. So the master is saying, seek to judge not by appearances, but by the greater reality of things. I attended a seminar, business seminar some time ago, and it was interesting. It was mostly sales professionals and that sort of thing. And so they were talking about how are you showing up in the world? Is the way you are showing up physically, This was not a spiritual seminar. This was about business. But it was, how are you showing up in the world? And they did a really interesting experiment. And they invited 20 brave souls to come up on stage. Nobody was planning ahead. And so everybody was wearing what they were wearing. And they had the people stand up. And then one by one, they just said, okay, they had the person close their eye. And they just say, what do you perceive about this person? And people would shout out, she's a mom, she's a housewife, she's a business professional. We made all these decisions. And then they asked the question, how comfortable would you be being in business with this person? And everybody raised their hand, and it went from 20% to 90%. Based strictly on how they were dressed, by their appearance. Now, is that wrong? Yes, it's terribly wrong. Now, I know you in this room don't do that. I get it. You're enlightened. You see the Christ being that is shining forth and make all determinations based upon the amount of light that is emanating from that person. Or, right? Or not. Right? Because we do that. We make decisions. Now, so that's not so terribly awful unless we allow that to truly define the rest of the relationship. Right? And so Jesus is saying to us, seek to see with righteousness, with right use, to see beyond the appearance. And so our work as spiritual beings is to not let our initial bias be something that hinders our greater expression of love. There's an interesting commercial I've seen a couple times on TV right now, and they've taken this guy who has these amazing dreadlocks and is a DJ, and they cleaned him up and put him in a suit. Some of you have seen this. And now they put him in a financial planner's office and caught him enough of the language that he can sit down with people and say, let us talk about your portfolio. And then they're asking the question, would you feel comfortable working with this guy? And they're like, yes. You seem knowledgeable. You seem whatever. And then they're saying, well, here's this video of him being a DJ. It's great. And they're like, ooh. Because, again, we make decisions sometimes based on limited amounts of information. So in learning to look beyond the appearance, we have to own that we have bias. As I said, part of it is essential because we can't be just truly open to all stimuli all of the time. It's too much. So our minds have devised a way so that we can filter out information. And it's brilliant and it's beautiful. But if we're not careful, we do filter out too much. We make decisions. We may make judgments about other people without truly having accurate information. So for me, I was thinking about this, these decisions we make, and I remember when I lived up in Sun Valley, and every year there's a conference up there, and it's called Allen and Company, and basically what they do is invite about 9/10 of the economy to it. All these major players in the world, the Dells and the Microsoft people and Oprah and Katharine Graham and all of these high level people show up for this conference, and they hang out and they do stuff. But during that conference, something has happened because the airport becomes this amazing display of jets and, you can't, and big jets private, but 747 private jets, it's like, okay, something's going on. But then when you're walking around on the street, you never know because everybody's wearing jeans. So you don't know that the guy standing next to you isn't a gazillion billionaire, right? It's just an interesting thing. You don't know who's there. Sometimes we like to pretend as if we would recognize who is who by the way they present themselves. Not the greatest indicator. So what I've loved about my own journey in this teaching, and what I love particularly about teaching practitioner studies, is that we spend almost a full year looking just at our own internal bias. You hear me say all the time, it is our belief system that determines our experience of reality. It is our own filters that determine our experience of reality in this world. It is not something that is happening to us. It is our own perception of what is happening to us. And so for some, the same exact experience can be a blessing or a curse. And we get to look at that in depth. Because if you're going to a practitioner to know the spiritual truth and reality for and about you, as Linda has so graciously invited you to do, you don't want them saying, what the heck were you thinking? Right? You don't need your mother right now. If you needed your mother, you'd go to your mother. You need somebody who's impartial and can listen to your story and help you to find the spiritual truth. So we believe that there is a spiritual wisdom intelligent resident within each person that is seeking its expression, and it is our job as spiritual practitioners to help you to reveal that truth, to move beyond limiting belief systems, to know the truth of who you are, and to bring that forth. So we're called upon to greater spiritual awareness. That's why I say it is so, I am convinced, and it's only taken me about 30 years to get here, but I'm convinced that the most important work that I do as a minister is my spiritual work. Is that shocking? This should not be shocking, but somehow I always know that, and yet there's budgets to be done. There are lunches to be made, as it turns out, when you realize on Saturday that you forgot to ask anybody to make lunch for the annual meeting. We're having chili again, sorry, but it's what I know to make a lot of quickly, right? There are endless details of things that must happen. And when I'm not careful, then when I get around to it, it's time for the spiritual work. I'm going to suggest to you all of our most important work, if we want to find peace and grace and joy and beauty in this world, is to do the inner work, to pay attention. In our meditation, in our spiritual practice, it allows us to open to the greater reality that is around us. I was reminded of an amazing story. I'm going to read it to you. I don't know if I can do that, but I like the way this is written. And so let me just share with you this story. A man sat at a metro station in Washington, D.C., and started to play the violin. It was a cold January morning. He played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, since it was rush hour, it was calculated that 1,100 people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. 3 minutes went by, and a middle-aged man noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace and stopped for a few seconds, and then hurried up to meet his schedule. A minute later, the violinist received his first $1 tip. A woman threw the money in the till and without stopping continued on to her work. A few minutes later, someone leaned against the wall to listen to him, but the man looked at his watch and started to walk again. Clearly, he was late for work. The one who paid the most attention was a 3-year-old child. His mother tagged him along, hurried, but the kid stopped to look at the violinist. Finally, the mother pulled hard, and the child continued to walk on, turning his head back all the time. This action was repeated by several children. Hear this, you must become like a little child. All the parents, without exception, forced them to move on. In the 45 minutes the musician played, only 6 people stopped and stayed for a while. About 20 gave him money, but continued to walk their normal pace. He collected $32. When he finished playing and silence took over, no one noticed it, no one applauded, there was no recognition. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the most talented musicians in the world. He had just played one of the most intricate pieces ever written. on a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before this playing in the subway, Joshua Bell sold out at a theater in Boston where the seats averaged $100 apiece. So this is the real story. Joshua Bell, playing incognito in the metro station, was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, and priorities of people. The outlines were this: in a commonplace environment at an inappropriate hour, do we perceive beauty? Do we stop to appreciate it? Do we recognize the talent in an unexpected context? One of the possible conclusions from this experience could be, if we do not have a moment to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world, playing the best music ever written on one of the finest instruments ever created, how many other things are we missing? Yeah. Think about it. We, as Americans, value being productive. We even say we want you to become a productive part of our society, because if you're not, there is no category for unproductive people, right? There's no place for you to go. I mean, really, right? It is so, and I watch this in myself, I watch it in so many people, we get so consumed by what we are doing that if we're not careful, we don't pay attention to who we are being. We don't pay attention to being mindful, to seeking and appreciating the value and the beauty that is around us all of the time. This is a wonderful story of being mindful, of being awake, of stopping to listen. And why I am a proponent of spiritual practice is what I know is it helps us to slow down. It helps us to slow our minds down. It helps us to connect with that infinite something. And whether that's sitting on a cushion or whether that's being in nature, but being outside of the constant stimulation that we are bombarded with. Some of us aren't content with just being bombarded with one source of stimulation. We like to watch the TV and be on the computer as we tweet and text and anything else that we can, right? It's insane. We're multitasking. Because single tasking, obviously, that's for losers. Just saying. Right? But that ability to slow down, that ability to appreciate, that ability to value what is in the moment. I was struck by this story. I'm sure most of you heard it on the news. This woman and her child who were in a car accident down in Spanish Fork. And they went over an embankment, turned over in the car. She was killed in the accident, and this little 18-month-old child sat suspended in her car seat for 14 hours. With the river running, freezing cold, and survived. Now here's what tragic, so sad, and yet the baby's going to be okay, it appears. But here's what's interesting. It was a fisherman that saw the wreck and called for help, and 4 different policemen, EMT people heard a voice crying for help. The mother was dead. The baby's 18 months old and unconscious. What did they hear? You see, things are not what they appear to be. And what we know is everything is vibration when it's all said and done. Everything's vibration. I know that my little dog can hear things that I can't hear, or hears them well long before I hear them. All of a sudden, something's happened. I know. Daryl reminded me that whales hear at a deeper vibration that we can't hear, right? We have to speed that up to be able to hear it. So vibration is happening all of the time, but we kind of focus in, and if we're not careful, we tend to focus on only that which is stimulative at the moment. That which is, that's kind of the danger of everything that pings. There's some part of our brain that every time your little text pinger pings, your brain's like, treat? That's how I look at it. Treat? You know what I'm talking about, right? You find yourself salivating? Right? So I don't want you to give up all your devices. I'm not asking you to go into the monastery. I'm just saying I think there may be some value in learning to be still, to learning to practice mindfulness, to turn away from the things that stimulate, to listen to that which is eternal, that which is true, and that which is known. Our lives are constantly changing. Our lives are constantly evolving. Everything around us is experiencing change because that's what form does. That's what form does. It's fascinating to me that we look to form, we look to structure, we look to things to remain the same so that we can feel comfortable. But I remember Michael Beckwith one time saying to me, it's all about learning to be comfortable on the edge of uncertainty. And that for me is the spiritual practice. I wanted to take a few moments today because I know not all of you will attend the annual meeting. And speaking of bias, it doesn't mean you don't love your church. You can, but, right? Some of you have lives and all that sort of thing, but I wanted to take a few minutes. Unlike me, obviously, right? Right? Just to talk a little bit, kind of the State of the Union. I always do this on whatever annual meeting day is, because I think it's important, and change is certainly a good topic for us to talk about. You see, I always start with my starting point with spiritual. Well, my starting point was earlier, but 5 years ago I began working in a official capacity with the center as the minister. And at that time, we were sitting in a place of not knowing. We weren't particularly comfortable on the edge of that uncertainty. The minister was leaving, and we just moved out of our building, and it was kind of iffy as to what would happen next. And so, being me, I said, well, that sounds fun. Let's do that. And so we kind of pulled our resources and figured out what was next and took step by step. And as this has evolved, we eventually found a place, and then we started envisioning moving into a more permanent facility, which led to us finding this place and raising the funds to be able to do that and creating miracle after miracle and redesigning and working really hard and sweating a lot and all that sort of thing. And so, boom, we are here. And so last year was really the first year of us being in this facility. We now have a year being here, and so we now know what it costs. Seems like it would have been a nice thing to know before, but, we had an idea. But until you're there, you know how that works. Until you're there, you don't really know. So we've done good. Not great. We make our bills, but we're living, as I like to say, a little too paycheck to paycheck for my taste, but we're doing it. And so we've gone through tremendous change. There's been so many changes in people. I'm going to make fun of Reverend Myrna because I can. I always say Reverend Myrna has always been my kind of rock here. No matter what else was going on, I always knew Reverend Myrna. Well, she decides at one point, I'm going to go to the hospital, and you can't stop me. And that kind of threw us into like, what's next? And then she went ahead and finally finished school, which, she was on this 10-year program. I thought, no, 10 years, I'll have her around forever. But no, she went ahead and graduated and decided to pursue her ministry. So I'm grateful to say that beginning in May, there will be a new Center for Spiritual Living in Layton under the direction of Reverend Myrna. So she left, she's not left, obviously she's right here, but she's moving in a new direction with her ministry. And lo and behold, Lynn Hagster, ministerial intern, decided it was time to return from her far country to be a part of the community, and so she's moving in and doing wonderful things in helping organize this. Reverend Jan has moved back, is helping organize some things. So I say that because what I keep learning is that I can never be too attached, thank you, Buddha, to any one person or personality, even though I would like to be. Sometimes I think, Lord, why didn't you make me a Mormon? You know? I'm serious. The more I learn about that community, it's like the bishop gets to say, I've received your calling, and you do it. Except for all of you. That's why you're here. Because you're right? I mean, I know. Oh, no, I got the independent ones. No way, you're not telling me what to do. In truth, that is what I love about our community until it changes, and I'm like, oh, right? And so we've seen changes. We, as you know, we hit a financial crunch in August, which created like, oh my God, what's going on? We made some changes. In that change, we discovered that there had been some money being misappropriated, and so we had to take action around that, and that's been amazingly difficult and good at the same time. So out of that, we also attracted this wonderful person who's always in our midst, Linda Forrest, who's been amazing in terms of what she does. We're so grateful. Yes. Our music director says, oh, I think after 16 years, I'm going to follow my own dream. Stop already with the dreaming, with the visioning. What? Where do you guys get this stuff? That's what I'm wanting to know. Where do you get this? That you can just follow your heart and your dream and create a life you want. What is that? And so, I was like, oh, how do we do this? And then, of course, Copo shows up, and he's got a whole new energy and dynamic that he brings. So I could go on and on and on. Yes, thank you. So as I said, in our lives, we want to look at things and say, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. And all those are snapshots. That any given moment is just life continuing, and it may not be pleasant at the moment, but if we're willing to believe more in the invisible than the visible, then we hold the space for a greater good to come forth. And so while this has been an amazingly challenging year, it's also been a really good year. And so it has convinced me more and more. So that's why I say, come back to what's important is doing the spiritual work. Now, we have so many opportunities in front of us, but I am convinced more than ever that we have important work to do as a spiritual community. That we have a gift to bring to the world. That there are many people seeking this type of spiritual community because the message we teach is not new anymore. It's not, oh my God, I never heard this before. It's kind of pervasive, but what people don't always know is how do you incorporate this positive thinking into your spiritual life and into your expression into the world? And that is a gift that we bring to the world. I loved Linda taking the time to share just some of the things that are going on here week after week after week. And our goal is to have more of that this is a gathering point, not only for what happens for us on Sunday, but what's happening so people can experience more of their divine self, whether that's as a physical level, at the mental and emotional level, or whether that's at a spiritual level. That's why we are here. That's what we're here to do. So for me, I just keep breathing. Breathing first. That's my first response. Keep breathing. Don't stop that. Keep praying. Keep meditating. And keep holding the vision of possibility of why we are here and what this is about. I find that if I become distracted by conditions, by personalities, by all that sort of thing, then it gets very difficult. You may experience this in your own life. That it is necessary, essential, I would say, that we return to source. We return to the wellspring. Jesus spoke of a well that would, he said to the woman, if you drink of this water, you will thirst again. But I can show you a spring of life, that if you drink of it, you will never thirst again. He was speaking about this spiritual dimension. And when we consciously choose daily to live and to practice and to be in that place, then we are not judging by appearances. Rather, we are judging and we are aware and we are mindful from a whole nother place of being. And so as we move forward into this next year and all that lies before us, I'm inviting all of us to continue to deepen in that spiritual practice. What I know is some of the things that we set in place years ago in terms of culture, in terms of how we would be together, are the things that have helped us sustain a rather difficult year. I've said to people, a lesser community, some of the things that happened this last year would have destroyed it. For me, I feel like we've grown stronger, more clear, more powerful. And I'm grateful to all of you and for the contribution you make to being this amazing place. Give yourselves a hand. Okay. Oh, oops. Somebody changed the time on me. Just a minute ago, I had like 15 minutes. So enough about the center. All that is just to say we continue to move forward, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for each of you. I'm grateful for what we create together. And I'm grateful for this divine idea that continues to seek its expression through us. Amen. Let us pray. As we simply take a moment to turn inward, to honor and acknowledge this divine life, this infinite being that is forever and ever seeking its self-expression in and through and as all of creation. I am reminded that whatever name we call this God thing, it is greater than that. It is the source, it is the substance that is forever and ever seeking its expression through its creation. And so I know that even as I open my heart and my mind and recognize that I live, move, and have my being in this presence, I recognize this spiritual truth for each of us gathered here. So I'm simply speaking this word of truth. I invite you to allow it to be your truth. As I recognize the presence of wholeness that reveals itself as health and well-being and vitality. I recognize the presence of divine love that is healing and transforming and transcending our little lives. That we find that place in our hearts to forgive freely, to receive joyously. That we allow ourselves to experience the spiritual magnificence of unconditional love. I'm knowing that we are abundant beings right here and right now. For we are one with the source and the substance of all that is. And so we allow our lives to be in dynamic flow, graciously giving, joyously receiving of this infinite bounty that Spirit would have us enjoy. I know that as we bear witness to this spiritual truth, it becomes our experience. And so I invite you in this holy instant where we commune together in the living Spirit, that perhaps this is the moment to release that which no longer serves you. Gently, lovingly, gracefully, we let it go. We move into that state of awareness, of divine appointment, of powerful surrender to allow that which is greater than the appearance to make itself known. To be healed, to be blessed, to be transformed. How good it is to know this truth. To know that in this moment we are blessed. That all we seek is seeking us. All that we are wanting to know is already provided. So we trust our heart to guide us, to direct us. How grateful I am. I recognize the many blessings, those seen and those yet to be realized. And so as we give thanks for those blessings, we find it natural and normal to extend a blessing. We begin by blessing this spiritual community, this divine idea that was started so many years ago, that continues to unfold, continues to bless, continues to prosper. We know that this is a place that touches our hearts and souls for greater good. We extend this blessing to our brothers and sisters around the planet, to the planet herself with all of her inhabitants. We're holding a high vision for a planet at peace, in harmony with itself, a world that works for all. And in this moment, we're blessing all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith. For we know beyond doubt that all pathways lead to the divine. And so we bless and honor those who are bringing forth greater truth, greater understanding, greater awareness. Something powerful is taking place on the planet, even now, and it is good, and we bless it. So in joy and gratitude for all of these blessings, we're simply giving thanks. We're giving thanks for a law of mind operating upon the consciousness we have established here, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned. And so in joy and gratitude, we simply release, allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.